Call the meeting to order. Start with roll call.
Chair Thorpe,
Here.
Vice Chair Greba,
Here.
Board Member Rodriguez, Board Member Wood,
Here.
and Board Member White.
Here. Go stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, public comments from the audience regarding items not on the agenda. This portion of the agenda allows an individual the opportunity to address the GSA on any items not on the closed session, consent calendar, public hearings, and agency business. Under state regulations, no action can be taken on non-agenda items, including issues raised under this agenda item. Members of the public should be aware of this when addressing the GSA regarding items not specifically referenced on this agenda. Any public comments for items not on the agenda?
I don't see any hands raised, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, consent calendar. All matters listed under consent calendar are considered routine and may be approved by one action of the agency unless a request for removal or discussion or explanation is received prior to the time agency votes on the motion to adopt. We have one item. Adopt the minutes of the March 26th GSA meeting and the May 28th GSA meeting. Do you have any public comments on consent calendar? I don't see any. We have a motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt.
First. Mike the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Presentation, groundwater dependent ecosystem.
Hey, I've been talking about groundwater and what you guys talking about. And one thing is finally completed that we have to bring information about it.
Not only speak into a live mic, but I can bring you a presentation. So let me see if I can share my screen. So now the question is, can you see it? Okay. So like I said, we met with the independent working group for a number of months. The wetlands folks in the north really established the process. You know, we looked at a lot of different methodologies. I'm going to walk you through that stuff quickly. So under Sigma, interdependent ecosystems are defined and actually called out separate from the 6 fundamental criteria that you have to meet as a groundwater management agency. So it is an important concept. And it's one of those things that that says you got to do it, but there's no guidance. So everyone is still figuring out how to do that, what that means. It's even more problematic when you start talking about how do you manage them, if you're going to manage them. And we haven't even determined where they are right now. So it's very new. The state is still developing guidelines around how to do this. But the first step is identifying where are they? What are they? what do they look like? How do we manage those things? And so, the first thing is, well, what are they, how do you define them, right? So the definition, in other words, whatever plants, animals, or natural communities rely upon groundwater to sustain them, either all in portion. So it's noted that groundwater dependent ecosystems are beneficiaries of the programs we put in place to manage groundwater. They got to be identified. Here it comes, monitored and assessed. So all of those things are in Sigma, but there's no specific funding associated with it, not a lot of detail about how to do it. Nevertheless, DWR in reviewing our GSPs called out specifically, they want to know from the Salinas Valley Basin GSA and ourselves what we're going to do about it, and to actually develop field data which identify those groundwater dependent ecosystems. So the watershed coordinator focused on that area that's identified in red. You can see that it makes up, portions of the Langley area, east side, and Pressure 180. I always kind of refer to it as the Morro Coho watershed. It's water's coming down out of the Gavilan water range in the north and flowing out to the ocean. And, as a first cut, it makes sense to use that as the area. The folks that are really running the program have done a lot of work in the area. There's a lot of focus on these wetlands, especially as you get closer to the ocean. And the real task was, well, okay, then how do we define these things under Sigma? So these are nice little cartoons, and I think they tell quite a good story. I'll go A, B, C, D. A, you can clearly see that there's groundwater that comes off the river. Those plants on the side of the river are under its influence. B, you see the same thing, and even though there's an aquitard, prevents the water from going any further. Maybe it's narrow where they're still connected. In C, you can see that it's all connected up, right? And it's essentially at the same elevation as the water course. And then the last one, you can see that they're not connected. The groundwater table is significantly below the, vegetation. That particular diagram best typifies the Oro Seco River. Because we've got vegetation out there. But if you look at it, it's kind of scrubby and low growing. It's not the big cottonwoods and the riparian that you see on the Salinas. It's because the Oro Seco River has such high transmissivity, such high percolation rates, that the groundwater is significantly below the vegetation root zone. So, how do we figure out where these things exist, right? Well, the Nature Conservancy has a pretty good GIS system that kind of identifies green stuff. You start with things like Google Maps and other sources. You look for things that are green, and you say, okay, that could be one. And you kind of keep digging further and further into the data till you get an idea of where, biologically speaking, things could be. You can, when you're looking at a map, Topo Map or a Google image, you can see oak trees, you can see, where creeks are, and Greenline streams or another one on USGS maps and the like. So there's a lot of data that went into this development of at least sourcing where these things were, getting an idea about it. So we acquired the data. We then looked for information on where the groundwater is in those areas, and then try to overlay some habitat on top of that. So here you got kind of an image of what some of that might look like. You can see the green areas in these maps. A lot of times they're going to follow streams and creeks, and they get heavier as you get closer to heavier in terms of coverage and density as you get closer to the ocean. So things start to kind of widen out, become more like a slough or a wetland. You can see the Salinas River is outlined very well. So this was like the first cut, okay? This looks like we could identify all these areas as potential. And by the way, we took the Salinas River, or I should say, the group recommended, and I believe the Salinas Valley Basin GSA will take this approach. So they're going to wait for the habitat conservation plan to lay out what's happening, all the habitat of Salinas, being that it's a managed river. It's a little bit more difficult to call it a groundwater dependent ecosystem, absent having some additional overlay of management around how the surface water is routed. Okay, so then point is, okay, where's groundwater available? So we looked on the far left, it's kind of like where the groundwater is, rather the surface elevation. And then we identified where the groundwater contours are. And we took the surface elevation and subtracted out where the groundwater was, and we came up with a depth of water table. Pretty straightforward. Could use the GIS. But in addition, up in the northern portion of the Salinas Valley Basin, there's a pretty extensive shallow aquitar. There's a big clay layer lens that there's a bunch of perched water. And so we just kind of discounted that because that water is not under any pumping. It's not being managed actively. And so it doesn't fall into the criteria of a groundwater basin that's connected to surface habitat that's being managed. It's not a primary aquifer. So we took that out of the equation entirely. We have those two overlays, got an idea. So a lot of the stuff that we looked at initially was up in the Langley area. It's not surprising. So it's a lot of the riparian corridors or some of those creeks and so forth upstream of the slough area. Once it gets down into the valley proper, that aquitar creates a layer that really prevents surface stuff from getting to the managed aquifers. And then in the southern area, again, it's streams and creeks. So you might be asking yourself, okay, what the heck do we use as a measure? I mean, what's the criteria, right? What constitutes the level of groundwater that's going to be impacting or needed for preparing habitat? And are oak trees the same? Which they're not. We, based upon a bunch of data and a really very good dialogue, I should say, Gus really helped inform the hydrogeology of this, set a standard of 30 feet. So groundwater's got to be within 30 feet of the surface for it really to be connected to the surface vegetation. And with oaks, because oaks have got both a shallow and a deep root system, we used 80 feet to ground. Just to be the. And so when we shook all that out, this was kind of the map we identified what we would focus on. Now, to date, rather, through this discussion, this has all been desktop. So the next step in this thing was to go out and ground truth it, send somebody out there and have them take a look at it. We developed, and we developed a monitoring approach based upon it's called CRAM, the California Rapid Assessment Method. It has got essentially a checklist that you give a grade of the health of the various wetlands that you're reviewing. It's fairly common to be used by biologists. So while it's going to vary a bit individual by individual, it's a pretty good method to use. And then you try to develop some sort of criteria through this CRAM method to determine whether an area has been impacted or not. You know, if one year you go out and it's green and lush and everybody's happy, and the next year you come out and it's brown and dying, because then this is a problem. But then you come back the following year and it's all green again. So you're going to have seasonal variation. But when you have like 5 years or whatever the criteria is that we ultimately get to of assessments, then we know that we have an impacted area and we get to dig deeper. So, you know, a lot of this at this point is really up for interpretation. And it's going to take some time for it to all sort out. This is the very first piece of work that was done. I think it was a pretty good approach to developing how we identify them and then which ones we start to look at, in terms of that's a wetland, that's not, the ground truthing, developing a methodology for assessing them. But we're still a long ways away from saying that's a problem or not. We still need to put in probably shallow groundwater wells in some areas to get an idea, because we just don't have wells everywhere where these groundwater dependent ecosystems exist. So that's another, chunk of work. All this is going to happen going forward. We're going to have to do this assessment in the forebay and in the Arroyo Seco area. Really, the Arroyo Seco really has just the Arroyo Seco River is going to be the primary player in the groundwater dependent ecosystems. And I think we'll find that we're in pretty good shape because of the way the river is. And physical parameters are going to keep that water at a pretty low level. Nevertheless, it's work that's going to have to be done. There's grant money that the Salinas Valley Basin GSA is going to employ, and there's going to be more said about groundwater dependent ecosystems in the next round of our GSP. So I'm going to pause. I know that was a lot, but now you at least have got, something you can look at, think about, and ask questions. I'll pause and say, are there any questions from you guys? None so far?
Yeah, I just got a quick question. So when do we think the Arroyo Seco portion would be? Is there an idea of when that would happen?
I would say within the next 5 years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my presentation.
Okay. We move on to agency business. Approved sub-grant agreement between the Arroyo Seco Groundwater Sustainability Agency and the Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency. Staff report.
Well, again, as you'll recall, our GSP for a moment, when we first crafted the Arroyo Seco GSP, we looked at going out and getting some idea of what the water quality was in some of the rural domestic wells in the area. Thought being that maybe somewhere down the line, there could be some consolidation, didn't really have an idea, didn't have our arms around how big of a problem, if any, it was. Well, that management action rolled into the forebay GSP and is part of our GSP. So it is a management action. It is something that we need to do. The good news is that we have grant money to do it. And the Salinas Valley Basin GSA has the grant. I've got Gus Yates to prepare the scope. Scope is, as you've seen in the board report and in the agreement. We have a subcontract with the Salinas Valley Basin GSA to do the work. My request is that you approve the agreement, allow me to execute it, and get Gus going on developing the report. The deliverable to DWR will be a desktop report. Because we're not going to do any sampling. We're going to just study existing data, compile that, prepare a report to submit to DWR. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I don't see any hands raised in the public sector either.
Public comment. Okay, board action. We need a motion to approve this.
Yes, sir.
Moved by Michael.
I'll second it.
Second by Raul. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business, consideration of fiscal year 2024-2025 budget for the Arroyo Seco Groundwater Sustainability Agency. Staff report.
Mr. Chair, the staff report is before you. It's very similar to last year's budget. I did increase it by 20,000 just as a way to cover this particular study cost in case the grant monies disappear. I don't think they will. The state doesn't have as much money as it did in previous years. So that's why I'm trying to get all these things done as quickly as possible. As a way to hedge that bet, I just thought I'd put 20,000 increase in it. We've been able to be under the budget every year. My recommendation to you is you approve it and we move forward into 24-25. Thank you.
Any public comments?
I see no hands raised.
Any questions or comments from board members?
I got a quick question related to the $20,000 we just talked about. Is that 20,000? Is that going to be budgeted for this year or will it be in the new budget?
It will be budgeted for 24-25. That's what the agreement that we have with Cities Foundation GSA. Doesn't begin until July 1, so it made sense to add it to next year's budget.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, we need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that.
By Robert and second by Paul. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business, receive the Roy City Groundwater Sustainability Agency General Manager Status Report.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This one's usually our catch-all. And as try as I might, I don't think I'm gonna break the 4:30 barrier today. I did have action items, but we've just zipped right through them, so I appreciate that. All kidding aside, there's one other item I think that we need to track, and we will be tracking. That's the completion of the deep aquifer study. It's done, it's available in the website for the Stateside Basin GSA. And there have been some presentations that have been made, at least out to the Water Resource Agency. And it's created quite a stir because there have been some recommendations that have come about through that study that folks didn't agree with. So as a way in which to bring you better information, I'm going to have Gus Yates, because I'm going to have Gus Yates come to the advisory committee meeting in July. He was one of the participants, one of the technical folks that helped review and provide input to Montgomery Associates and develop the report. That way he can walk us through all of those details and walk your advisory committee. And then I'll bring that same presentation to you and the board next month. I think it's important that we stay on top of it. The issue about the deep aquifer is not without controversy. Not the least of which is that the coastal area doesn't appear to get any kind of real recharge other than vertically through really torturous clay lenses. So it's a problem, especially with the elevations continuing to fall. And that's all I really had is additional. Oh, I do have one thing. On a personal note, I've got a medical procedure I have to do next month on our board date, and I will not be able to be not available on the 23rd next month. I don't know if we have anything that's super critical. My guess is we may not. So I would ask the board some flexibility to either schedule a special meeting or for me to cancel it as I get further into July. Does that work?
I think it's gonna break my heart if the meeting gets canceled.
Okay, so I got that.
Well, it sounds like we're gonna have an advisory committee.
We are gonna have an advisory.
Yeah.
Yep, we haven't had one of those. You know, we just gotta stir that up a little bit.
Okay, do we have any public comments on the general manager's report?
Again, I see no hands.
See, questions, comments from board members? No. Okay, you see in file. No further business during the meeting.
424.